School has never been a pleasant place for me. I never played on a sports team, wasn't part of the popular crowd, and to be honest, I wasn't particularly smart. I didn't have any problems, but I didn't do anything exciting either. My burning dream was to leave there. But I had one great talent. I was a jack of all trades, and I had a sixth sense when it came to installing electrical equipment. My name is Brandon Michaels, and my father worked as an electrician his entire working life. He has no relevant qualifications, but earns good money. After finishing school, I applied to become an apprentice at a large electrical company. They sent me to their in-house college in the Midwest to qualify as an electrical engineer and paid for my tuition with a living stipend. College was a fun place, with parties, girls, a little drinking, but mostly a lot of work. I excelled not only in installation and maintenance, but also in design and calculations. I graduated in the top 5 of my class and received a job offer at a new facility in the same state as the school. The job was in engineering and estimating, and I supported the sales and purchasing departments. It was an office job, but the salary was much higher than my expectations. When I was offered the job, I was told it was an entry-level position on the management team, and I could expect a promotion. I arrived in the city 5 days before work started. The company arranged for me to rent a short-term apartment. I moved out of college, and my mom and dad brought my things from home, plus some kitchen utensils and small appliances. My new job started on Monday. The new facility was overworked and understaffed, so I worked long hours. Since it was just my boss and I in the department, we worked hard and I quickly gained experience. The boss was only a few years older than me, and he said his job was to train me so I could run a similar department at a larger facility in another state. Our office has quickly gained a reputation for high-quality work. At the end of my second week on the job, I was invited to a club with some of the sales team. We sat in a booth with 2 tables. There were 4 girls at another table. After a few drinks, the sales staff asked the girls to dance. All 4 were invited, but only 3 agreed. The one who did not agree was sitting next to me. I looked at her and said, "I can't dance, but would you like to try?" Her face lit up, and she replied, "I thought you'd never ask." We danced a few fast numbers, and when the slow music started, we just stood there. Neither of us wanted to leave, but neither of us wanted to take the first step. I closed my eyes, took her hand, and pulled her towards me. She quickly pressed herself against me, and we slowly danced. I learned that her name was Joanne, and that she lived nearby and worked in a call center for a large IT company providing customer support. Joanne and I were very similar. Neither of us will ever become models, but neither of us can be called ugly. She was 4 inches shorter than me, maybe 5'6", with small breasts. She was quiet but had a keen sense of humor. At the end of the evening, I asked if we could meet again for dinner. I was happy when she agreed to meet the next evening. We exchanged cell phone numbers to set up a meeting, and I left feeling like I was going to love my new place. Joanne and I's relationship developed quickly, and we were married 3 years later, both at the age of 24. Both had good jobs, but we decided to rent an apartment near the city center. She loved it, and I expected a quick promotion and moved to another state. Our first and only argument occurred 2 years after our wedding. I was offered a promotion to senior manager at a new facility in Arizona. It was a big opportunity for me, but Joanne refused to move. She was born in this city and had no intention of moving anywhere else. Due to the age structure at my current job, I would never have gotten the same opportunity. I thought for a long time and decided that we both made good money. The cost of housing in our city was very low, which meant that we had a very high standard of living indeed, and I loved Joanne too much to upset her. So I turned down the promotion, and life went on. 2 months before our 5th wedding anniversary, we were very happy in our lives. We had a great social life. We had saved up a very nice down payment for a house, and like most people our age at 29, we had an active and enjoyable sex life. Construction of a new residential area had just begun on the outskirts of the city, and we chose a plot of land that we would like to buy. With the down payment we saved, we could buy the lot, and the mortgage would be less than our current rent. We took an option on the site and had to sign a contract in 5 months when construction began. One Sunday evening, we were at my mother-in-law's for dinner. My mother-in-law was approaching her 59th birthday, and Joanne began to discreetly ask her what she wanted for her birthday. My mother-in-law stopped eating, looked her daughter in the eyes, and said, "I don't want anything for this birthday. I want a grandson for my 60th. The room became completely silent except for the sound of the mother-in-law's knife and fork scraping across the plate as she resumed eating. Joanne and I just looked at each other, stunned. To be honest, children have never been part of our life equation. Joanne had always been on birth control, and neither of us expressed any interest in starting a family. On the way home, there was complete silence until we entered the territory of our residential complex. As I parked the car, Joanne said, "What do you think of Mommy's birthday present?" We both got out of the car, and as we started walking up the stairs to our door, I said, "Well, this could definitely be fun to pack." The night was strange as we sat watching TV in silence, but Joanne practically attacked me when we got into bed. As we lay in each other's arms, I asked her if the thought of family bothered her, and she said it did. She said she had wanted to take our marriage to the next stage for some time, but didn't know what she wanted until her mom spoke up. I had to admit that the idea of becoming a father seemed right to me. We decided that for our 5th wedding anniversary, we should go on vacation. A search on several travel sites helped us find a good full-board resort in the Caribbean. Topless sunbathing was allowed there, and I knew Joanne wouldn't sunbathe topless, but I also knew she didn't mind being around women who did. Our wedding anniversary fell on Thursday. The resort had a couple of restaurants, both with excellent reviews, but one of them cost extra. It had outstanding reviews on TripAdvisor. I booked it for Thursday evening when I booked the rest of the trip. There were 3 flight options. We could fly from our local airport to Dallas, Colorado, or Atlanta. From there, we could fly to the island. The flight through Atlanta was the shortest, but it meant flying very late at night on the return trip. We chose to connect in Dallas because it was a day flight, and given time zones, we would leave at noon on Saturday and be back home by 7 p.m. that same day. The plan was for Joanne to continue taking birth control until Wednesday. We will enjoy the pool, beach, and other amenities at the resort. On Thursday, we'll go on a tour of the island, then go out to dinner, and head back to our room early to start making our baby. Then we'll do the same on Friday and get home in time and fresh enough to continue on Saturday. We were both excited about the vacation and the family it was about to start. As vacation day approached, Joanne was insatiable. I didn't complain. We both packed our bags. She put her contraceptives in her makeup bag and said, "I can't wait to flush them down the toilet." I told her to pack a spare set in her carry-on in case her bag got lost. We didn't want to start too early, and we could flush all her pills at once on Thursday morning. What a ceremony this will be. The flight went as expected, and we arrived at the hotel with all our luggage around 19:00. The journey time was 8 hours, and we were 3 hours apart, so we were both a little tired but ready to start our holiday. When I checked in, the first hint of trouble arose. I heard a French voice shout from the crowd, "Here, to the reception." When I turned around, standing behind me was an impeccably dressed man in his 50s, but he was looking at my wife as if she were dessert after a very expensive dinner. He took Joanne's hand, kissed it, and asked, "What is your name, mademoiselle?" Joanne blushed in such a way that it was immediately clear that the man had just bewitched her, and muttered, "Joanne." The flawless stranger said, "Well, I'm Felipe, and I hope we spend a lot of time together while you're here." I turned around completely and said, "Thank you, Felipe. But my Ina and I look forward to spending quality time together." Felipe, still holding my wife's hand to his lips, turned his head and said, "But sharing such beauty is what a vacation is all about." As he said this, I felt an arm wrap around mine, and a woman's voice said, "I am Elizabeth, and I am Felipe's wife. Come, tell me about this wonderful resort." I freed myself from Elizabeth's hand as the hotel manager handed me the key. I took Joanne's hand from Felipe's and said, "Nice to meet you. Joanne, let's find our room." Joanne looked thoughtful when we got into the elevator. I asked her what was wrong, and she whispered, "Nothing," but I could look into those eyes and listen to that voice for hours. When the doors opened, I said, "I hope not, because you are mine, and I intend to take full advantage of what you have to offer." She smiled at me and expressed the hope that this was indeed the case. After our luggage was brought to our room, we washed up and changed, then headed out to find a place to grab a bite to eat and a couple of drinks while we watched the world go by. As we entered the bar, I heard Felipe shout, "Joanne, come here. There is a place for you." I grabbed Joanne's hand tightly, trying to direct her in the other direction, but she didn't want it and pulled me along with her to the table. When we arrived at the table, there were about 8 couples sitting around it. One couple was about 38 years old. The rest were about 40 or 50 years old. Something immediately seemed off to me, as it seemed like the couples were separated while they were being intimate with others. There was a place next to Felipe where he brought Joanne, and Elizabeth took my hand and led me to a seat on the other side of the table. I asked her to let go of my hand as I wanted to sit with my wife. Elizabeth looked me in the eyes and said, "Oh, Felipe wants you and your wife to join our little club this week, and he's chosen Joanne as his favorite." I looked her straight in the eye and said loudly so everyone, especially Joanne, could hear, "You're all in an open relationship." She said quietly, "This is only an exchange of affection and love among those you respect." I stood up and walked over to Joanne, saying, "Joanne, we're leaving." We left the bar, and Joanne turned to me with anger in her face and voice, saying, "What the hell was that?" I told her about my conversation with Elizabeth and said, "We won't enter into that lifestyle. I think we should stay away from these people." Joanne was silent on the way to the balcony bar and said very little during our meal. We went to bed, and for the first time in weeks, she refused to have sex. The next morning, we both changed into beach clothes and went to breakfast. Joanne seemed happy again, and we discussed what we would do. We decided to go to the beach in the morning and see what the rest of the day would bring. We went back to the room, grabbed sunscreen, books, and other things, and then headed to the beach. On the beach, the sand was warm, so we took sun loungers and a beach umbrella. Just as I was about to, it was time to put sunscreen on Joanne when I heard Felipe shout, "Joanne, can we join you?" I quickly said, "Say no." But Joanne looked up and said, "Yes." Felipe and Elizabeth pulled up chairs, with Elizabeth sitting between Joanne and me, and Felipe on Joanne's other side. Felipe looked at Joanne, then at the sunscreen and said, "Let me do this for you." He leaned down, unzipped Joanne's bikini top, and began to apply the cream. Something she would never have done before and would definitely reprimand me if I did. While he was doing this, Elizabeth took off her t-shirt, revealing that she was not wearing a bikini top. No matter how hard I tried, Felipe and Elizabeth constantly manipulated me into getting me away from Joanne so Felipe could continue talking to her. At one point, Elizabeth dragged me into the bar to deliver drinks. As we waited for drinks, I saw Felipe take out his phone and pair it with Joanne's, clearly exchanging numbers. He then started doing something to Joanne's phone that I couldn't see. When we got back, it was almost noon, and I said, Joanne and I needed to get away from the heat for the day. Without giving her the opportunity to complain, I collected all my things and headed towards the hotel. She followed me, saying, "Wait for me? Where's the rush?" I stopped and looked at her when we were out of sight and earshot and said, "I don't like this couple, and he's after you. I feel very uncomfortable with it, and you seem to encourage him." I turned and went to the hotel. She stood in stunned silence, then followed me. When we reached the room, I heard a WhatsApp message on her phone. I looked at the closed screen and noticed that the number began with the international dialing code 33, the international code for France. I also noticed that the number was in her address book under the name Fell. She put down the phone to go to the bathroom. I took it and pressed the screen to open it. I entered her password, which I knew since we both used the same code for convenience, and discovered that the password had been changed. Now I knew what Felipe had done earlier, entering his number into her phone and changing the password so I couldn't read it. We were both lying in bed, but there was a distance between us that had never existed before. We lay in silence for quite some time. Then Joanne asked, "What do you think of Elizabeth?" My response was quick. I said, "I don't like either of them. They're in an open relationship and they're grooming you to be his mistress." I sat down and looked her in the eyes, saying, "And he doesn't care if he ruins our marriage in the process. I won't go to Elizabeth or any other woman, and if you sleep with him, I'll divorce you." "You." She flinched away from me because of the venom in my voice. After another period of silence, she sat down and said, "But Felipe says that variety stimulates the sex life of a married couple, and if they do it together, then it is not cheating." I stood up, and the look of anger on my face shocked her even more. I said, "Two things. I will never give you permission to sleep with him, so if you do, you will be a cheater, and it will lead to divorce. Second, his presence has already completely killed our sex life. I can't even bring myself to touch you after the way you act towards him. If you sleep with him, I'll never be able to touch you again." With these words, I left the room, slamming the door. I forgot about the changed password on her phone, but I was glad I didn't use it as an example. I kept this in reserve in case I needed it later. I walked down to the front desk and noticed a guest computer room nearby. I walked in there and decided I needed to prepare for the worst. I logged into my old bank account online and found that my original accounts were still open, but inactive. I followed the link to activate the accounts by submitting the new ID information I was able to obtain from my cloud storage. I then ordered a new debit card for this account, which was supposed to arrive at our apartment on Friday. Then I logged into the Delta Airlines website, based on the fact that if this lasted all week, chances were that Friday, our last night, would be the big moment. There were seats available on the 11:30 p.m. flight on Friday night to Atlanta and a 3 a.m. connection to our local airport. Taking into account time zones, I would be home by 5 a.m., which corresponds to 8 a.m. on the island. Both flights cost less than $100, so I booked them, hoping I was just wasting my money. I started researching the divorce laws in our state. Since we didn't have children and were renting an apartment, the process was quick and easy. Separate the assets, which consisted of cash deposits, and everyone owned their own car, which meant no financial problems. Although she earned less than me, the difference was such that alimony was not required. Joanne could request counseling, but without children, both parties had to agree to it. There was an advertisement on the website for a divorce lawyer in our city, and I simply followed the link. There was a contact form that I filled out. She requested financial information, which I downloaded from online banking and attached to the form. As I was closing the web page, Elizabeth came in smiling and said, "So, have you gotten over your inhibitions and are ready to accept the inevitable with Felipe and Joanne?" I looked at her with confusion, and her face changed from a bright smile to concern, and she asked in a quiet voice, "What did you do?" My answer was simple. "I'm making plans," and I walked past her. When I got to the elevator, I heard her scream, "Brandon, stop! Talk to me!" But the elevator doors opened, and I walked in, pressed the correct floor, and saw the elevator doors closing as she continued to scream, "Brandon, stop!" I walked into our room, and Joanne was sitting on the bed with her phone in her hand. She had a look of concern on her face as she said, "What were you doing?" I walked past her to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. After the first sip, I said, "Well, obviously Elizabeth told you where I was. I'm just making my own plans in case you're stupid enough to do what Elizabeth just described as inevitable." I then went out onto the balcony and sat down with my phone to check my emails. The lawyer's office received an automatic response saying that someone would contact me on Monday around noon. It was 15 hours local time, so I put it in my calendar. Joanne stood in the doorway, worry deeply etched on her face. The WhatsApp message sounded again, and she entered her new password and read the message. I looked at her as she answered the phone. Then I asked, "When are you going to tell me your new password, or are Felipe's messages private and confidential?" She blushed and turned away from me. I heard her voice shake as she said, "Sorry," before walking back into the room and sitting on the couch without telling me the new password. About an hour later, she came back to ask where we were going for dinner. My answer was simple: Anywhere where Felipe and his crowd of girls aren't. When I turned around, her eyes were red, as if she had been crying, but it was clear that she had made a decision, and I would not change it. Again, she turned back to the room, but this time she went to the bathroom. Suddenly the thought occurred to me. Had she left her iPad behind? I went to her carry-on luggage and her iPad was there. I quickly took it to the balcony and opened it. It still had the same password as before. She had WhatsApp Messenger on her iPad, and I synced it with her phone, giving me access to her messages. I scrolled through messages with Felipe and found that they were coordinating times for dinner, the beach, and other places at the resort. As I watched, it was clear that they were exchanging messages right now, discussing me and how she felt I wouldn't join their group. Felipe persuaded her, saying that this would improve our lives and that all married men dream of seeing their wives play with others. I really hoped she didn't believe this nonsense, but I was afraid that she did. While I was watching, another message came from an unknown number, but with a French code. It said that it is better to ask for forgiveness than permission. It was clear that it was Elizabeth, as she kept saying that she would satisfy me on Friday, and in her opinion, I would never divorce her for a little fun. My suspicion that our last night would be the highlight was confirmed, and I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. I was able to download the histories of 2 conversations and send them to my email, then deleted the sent messages. Joanne left the room before I was ready, saying she would go get a table for our dinner. When I arrived at the restaurant, she was already sitting with Felipe and others. She called me, but I turned and left. Elizabeth came running, saying, "Please join us." I just looked and said, "No, thanks, this is not my company." She followed me to another restaurant, and when I sat down, she came up and asked me to join. I looked at her and said sharply, "No." She sat down anyway and said, "You might as well at least enjoy what we have to offer, because you know Joanne will sleep with Felipe, and nothing will stop that now." Without looking up from the menu, I replied, "Well, this will be the end of our marriage, because I don't forgive." She visibly shuddered, then said, "You don't divorce such a beautiful woman over a holiday affair." I looked into her eyes, holding my gaze until she looked away, then said, "Proc has already begun. Her actions on Friday night will determine the outcome. Now please leave me alone. Your presence will ruin my dinner." It was very rude, but I was in no mood to be nice to this woman who was happy to destroy my marriage for what I thought was validation of her own life choices. Elizabeth stood up and walked away, keeping her back very straight. 5 minutes later, Joanne came and sat down. She took the menu and asked what I would order. As soon as the waiter arrived, I placed my order. She turned to the waiter and said, "I'll take the same, please." We sat in silence for a while. Then Joanne said, "What did Elizabeth tell you?" My answer was deliberately rude. "It's just that you're going to have fun with Felipe on Friday night, and there's nothing I can do about it." She looked down at the table, and I had a feeling Elizabeth was right. Joanne then said, "Have you told her you've started divorce proceedings?" Her head was so low that I couldn't see her face, so I decided that if my marriage was going to survive, now was the time to go all in. I contacted a divorce lawyer and asked him to prepare documents. If you sleep with him, I will continue. If not, I will cancel. Be absolutely sure, you will not get my permission, and I will not forgive you if you do. Now you know my position. The ball is on your side. The food was brought to the table, and while I ate, she sobbed quietly. In the end, she said, "If you loved me." I quickly hissed, "Stop! Obviously I don't love you enough, so maybe we should get a divorce." I got up and left before she could respond, but I'm confident that my marriage is probably over since she's obviously made up her mind. Monday went the same way. A little before 15. I returned to the room and sat on the balcony to talk to the lawyer. The lawyer explained the rules to me and said that the quickest and easiest route would be to file an irreconcilable difference, requesting no counseling based on the absence of children and my wife's desire for a different relationship. I ordered the documents to be prepared. I could sign them on Monday afternoon and my wife could receive them that evening. Joanne and I were very distant from each other the rest of Monday, all of Tuesday and Wednesday. I didn't go near Felipe and Elizabeth. Joanne spent most of her time with me, but I knew she made time during the day and evening to join them for short periods, usually when I was in our room avoiding the heat or at night when I was watching a baseball game. At this stage, I didn't care what she did. On Wednesday evening, while I waited for Joanna to change, I looked at her WhatsApp again on the iPad. The last message explained everything. It read, "Make sure you don't stop taking the pills. You can reward Brandon when you get home with the great pleasure of being pregnant with a new sexy you." I downloaded the messages, sent them to my phone, and copied them to the lawyer, just in case. On Thursday morning, I gave Joanne her anniversary card and gift. Then I said, "Okay, let's put this Felipe thing behind us and wash off these pills so your mom can get her gift." "On your 60th birthday." She stuttered, then quickly said, "Okay, but I thought we'd do this later." She took out her pack of pills, and I noticed that the pill for today had not been taken. We both started pushing the pills one by one into the toilet, laughing as we did it. It was the friendliest moment since we arrived. Then I said, "What about the extra packaging you brought?" She had a scared look on her face as I went to her bag and took out a pack. There was no tablet for today. I picked up the package and looked at it, saying, "Oh, look!" She turned and walked out the door. I didn't follow. On Thursday, I went golfing and didn't get back until about 4 p.m. She was waiting for me in the room. She tried to hug me, but I backed away and she backed away. I just looked at her and said in a dead voice, "Do you and Felipe want to make a reservation for tonight?" She cried and said, "What is happening to us? I wanted to be with you all day and all night." I walked past her in silence. She followed me saying, "Please take me to dinner for our anniversary." We went, but it was very tense, and neither of us made any moves towards intimacy that night. It was dawn on Friday, and Joanne had been full of nervous excitement since the morning. She was constantly writing on WhatsApp, and each message made her smile more and more. I didn't talk to her. At breakfast, Felipe was at his usual table with the rest of his group. Joanne didn't even notice that she sat down at the table with him, and I went out to sit on the balcony. Nobody came to me. I spent most of the day in the computer room. I split the bank accounts, moving 50% into my old checking and savings accounts. I then printed out the divorce papers and took them up to our room to read. At 6 p.m., Joanne stood up and said, "I haven't seen you much all day." I continued reading my book and said, "You didn't see me at all today? I was in this room, you just didn't notice." This didn't even bother her as she went to her closet and took out some clothes. She said, "I'm going to get dressed now. I'm having dinner with Felipe, and you have a table booked on the 8th floor with Elizabeth." I stood up and said, "So the inevitable is happening, huh? Well, what happens after this is also inevitable." With that, I took off my wedding ring and put it in her hand, saying, "You can put it back on my finger when you and I have dinner together, or it will become a useless trinket and you can throw it in the trash. When Felipe is done with you." She grinned and said, "Elizabeth said you'll try one last time to stop this, but it will happen. I need to do this before we start our family. If you act like a macho man, I'll never forgive you, and our marriage will end. So accept it, enjoy your time with Elizabeth, and when we get home tomorrow, we can start making a baby." I don't know where the loud laughter came from, but it came from the pit of my stomach. Then I shook my head and said, "If you do that, you'll be a total cheater. My life, and I will divorce you. If you don't do this, you will divorce me for my macho behavior. Either way, it looks like our marriage is over. One thing is for sure, I will not make you a child, and your mother will have to do without a grandson for her 60th birthday." She took her clothes and said, "God, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Decide for yourself if you want this free pass, but I'll see you tomorrow to start the rest of our lives." With that, she left the room, carrying clothes for the night with another man. Since the marriage was now over, I went to the computer room to email the lawyer confirming an appointment on Monday afternoon to sign the divorce papers so they could be filed with the court and served. My next step was to the local real estate agency's website, where I found a short-term, fully furnished apartment with a permanent lease agreement. I paid a month's rent, plus a deposit in advance, and was able to pick up the keys tomorrow when the office opened at 9:30 a.m. As I was leaving the computer room, Elizabeth, dressed to kill in a little black dress, walked up to me and said, "Where are we going?" I just said, "We're not going anywhere, I'm going home." She looked shocked and said, "But you're leaving tomorrow." To which I replied, "Plans change." A strange expression appeared on her face, and she said, "What have you done now?" I turned and walked towards the elevator, and over my left shoulder said, "What I promised." She stood and looked at me as the elevator doors closed. I packed my suitcase, took my passport from the safe, but decided to leave the safe door open. Joanne didn't know the combination. I just wanted to leave and not make her life miserable. I noticed that she left my wedding ring on the table, so I put it on her passport in the safe. I grabbed my suitcase and went down to check in to ask when the shuttle to the airport left. They told me it would be in 15 minutes, so I left my suitcase and went out onto the balcony. I saw Joanne and Felipe having a very intimate conversation, and when Joanne saw me, she showed me the FAQ. I picked up my phone and took a photo of her and Felipe, then sent the photo to Joanne's mom on WhatsApp with the caption, "This is Joanne's new boyfriend. Sorry, but no grandchildren from me." I waited at the shuttle door. As I got into it, my phone rang. It was Joanne's mother. Without waiting for a greeting, she shouted, "What the hell is this photo?" I just said that she was going to sleep with her boyfriend tonight because I thought it would be good for our marriage. Mom was shocked, and after a brief discussion about the holiday and what had happened, she asked if there was a chance for our marriage. I gave her a one-word answer, "No." I heard her cry, and she replied, "I understand, and we will miss you." I told her I was leaving tonight, and Joanne would need to be picked up from the airport tomorrow. The flight to Atlanta was uneventful, and I had about an hour-and-a-half wait for my connecting flight. I turned on the phone and received 3 messages from a French number. One was a photograph of Joanne, naked and sleeping. The second was a video of she clearly had sex with someone. The text from the video read, "Hope you like what you see. She'll be more energetic for you tomorrow, for sure." I forwarded all 3 messages to the lawyer, then turned off the phone. When I arrived at the apartment, I turned on the phone. There was a message from Joanne. "We're going to the balcony restaurant for breakfast in 1 hour. Why don't you join us? Looking forward to getting back to your place." I simply ignored the message and started packing my things. I was on autopilot and packed 2 suitcases and a bag in an hour. I then opened my mail and picked up my new debit card. I ended up writing letters to the landlord and utility companies to cancel my participation and paid half of all bills before termination. I also copied the letters to Joanne so she could do the same if she wanted. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law came. She asked me to make her coffee so we could talk. She asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, and again I told her there was no chance. We were done, and Joanne knew it when she left. She began to cry. As she was leaving, Joanne called. I answered, and a breathless Joanne said, "Where are you? Why is my mom asking who I slept with? And why is your phone ringing like you're back in the US?" I said, "Hey, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." I handed the phone to her mother, who took it and said, "You are a stupid fool. You ruined everything good in your life. And for what?" I heard Joanne scream, followed by the request, "Please pass the phone to Brandon." I took the phone and said, "You didn't believe me, it's over now. You'll find your ticket and passport in the safe, and the front desk will direct you to the shuttle. Just make sure you go to the correct gate for your transfer in Dallas. Your mom and dad will meet you at the airport. I'm sorry, but the only way I can forgive you is knowing that you will never do it again, and the only way I can guarantee that is to leave, dividing the property in half. I left cancellation letters for you if you want to leave the apartment. We have an option on the house, so if we don't do anything, that option will expire in 3 months. I heard a huge sob, and then a very quiet voice. "Okay, can we talk when I get home?" I kept the line open but didn't speak, and she asked, "Don't we have a chance?" I simply replied, "No," then said, "Goodbye, Joanne. I'm sorry about the vacation," and hung up. I left her mom and went to the real estate agency, picked up the keys, then to the phone store to change the number, which will take effect next Wednesday. When I arrived at the new apartment, I fell on the bed and slept for 5 hours straight. I was woken up by the phone ringing. It was Joanne who said that she had returned to the apartment and asked me to come home. My response was sharp. "I'm home, Joanne. It's just you're home now." She hung up because she was crying so hard she couldn't speak. On Monday, I went to work and found an email offering me a new position in the Texas branch. I filled out the taste before starting work and took it to the HR department. At lunchtime, my boss came in and asked why I had changed my mind about moving. I told him the story. 2 hours later, I received an email from HR informing me that the position was mine. I will start working in a month. My boss called me in and said, "They wanted you for this position, but they didn't think you'd apply. It was approved 10 minutes after you applied." I had a meeting with a lawyer at 15:00. She advised that Joanne was notified at 4:30 p.m., and all I had to do was provide original signatures on all documents. Joanne was at her parents' house, and the lawyer told me to expect my phone to blow up. At 4:35 p.m., Joanna's mom called, saying that Joanna had been notified and that she was curled up at the front door. She asked if I could come and talk to her. I said I was sorry, but I couldn't do it. We're done, and I'm moving on. The next month was hell. Joanne was at work morning and evening. She tried to find out where I live and what my new number is. The lawyer advised me to also buy a new phone so that Joanne would not have access to the Find My Phone feature. I worked a lot from home and from the unit, as all my work was handed over to new employees, but it also allowed me to avoid it. Security kept her away from the office and the parking lot, but one day she caught me walking into a lawyer's office during the day. She literally hung on my leg and begged me to stop the divorce and come back to her. The security guard at the office had to pull her away. She did not hire a lawyer, and at the first hearing the judge said he would grant the claim. She begged him to reject it, but he said I had the right to choose, and I chose divorce. At the next hearing, she hired a lawyer, but was told she had no grounds, and the divorce was granted. It would become final in 6 months. Before the divorce was finalized, I moved to Texas. I found an apartment and moved in, keeping mostly to myself. About 4 months later, while walking through a grocery store, I was nudged on the shoulder by a short woman about my age whom I vaguely recognized. She said, "Hello, my name is Elaine. I work for your main supplier. You don't even look at me, but I want to get to know you better. So, leave this basket and let's go. Get some coffee." 8 years have passed since that day in the supermarket. I had just been promoted to vice president in charge of Texas, and my photo was posted on the company website. Elaine and I were at the scan. She is pregnant with our 3rd child and is in her last week of term. We walked into the office as she had left her car in the company parking lot when the secretary said, "Mr. Michaels, there is a woman waiting for you there." When I turned around, I saw Joanne walking towards me with open arms. She cried as she said, "Brandon, I've come to take you home." At that moment, Elaine stepped between us and said, "Are you Joanne?" "I'm Elaine, and Brandon is already home." Joanne stopped, looked at Elaine's pregnant belly, and froze. To my surprise, Elaine walked up to her and hugged her tenderly. Joanne looked at her and asked, "Is this Brandon's baby?" Elaine said yes. "And this is our 3rd. Joanne straightened up, hugged Elaine, and said, "Please take care of him. He needs it." She came up to me and said, "I'm sorry. I really ruined everything, but I never gave up hope that I would be the one to carry your child. I promise I will never contact you again." I leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, saying, "Thank you," then took Elaine's hand and led her into my office. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.